Hello, this is Professor Humling, and welcome again to English 1302. As you've seen by now in your syllabus, this class is going to focus on using research to help add depth to your analytical writing about literature. Now, the word analysis comes from roots that mean to cut, all the way back to ancient Greek terms meaning to loosen up. So analyzing means we're breaking something apart to learn how its parts work. I always say that analysis is a two-part process. First, you ask yourself what the text is doing, and then you figure out why it's important that it's doing that. So what's happening in the text, and what does it mean? Why is it important? So being able to analyze well, to really know how to break up a text and study its parts, is a skill. And like all skills, you can get better at it through practice and by studying how other people do it. That's what we'll be focusing on the first several weeks of this class. In a face-to-face class, one of the best ways to get this experience with analysis is through discussion. That's always tricky with an online class, though. Discussion boards are never quite as good as a face-to-face conversation with one another. But we'll have to make the best of what we've got. So, how do we do that? As we work with literature the next couple of weeks, I'll be assigning you to different roles to further our discussions. And I'd like to take you through how those roles will work and what I'll be expecting of each of you at each stage of our discussion. So, we're going to go ahead now and go click over to the fiction discussion, which you can always reach right here through the Resources tab on the left. Go into Fiction. And here we've got a thread waiting for us for our very first story, The Necklace. This is a classic short story, frequently studied for its use of irony. You may have read it earlier in your own studies. We, of course, are going to be reading a translation here from the original French. So, let's go into the thread. And first, I'm going to pretend that I have been assigned the first role in the discussion cycle. That is to pose some opening questions about the text. Now, since these questions get the ball rolling, they're really important and honestly the hardest part of the discussion cycle. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to click reply to the thread that's already created for the story. Don't start your own thread for any of the stories or poems or anything odd that's listed on the syllabus. I'll always have those waiting for you. Now, down the road, you'll be selecting your own literature from the book to launch discussions of. And in those cases, you'll start your own threads in the independent reading forum. But for the first several works we're studying, I'll always have it started in either the fiction, drama, or poetry forums. So now that I've clicked reply, I need to pose a question for the class to think about and respond to. So let's see. Let's try something like, what object does Madame Loisel lose? So this question is terrible for a couple of reasons. For one thing, it's just ridiculously easy to answer. So all you have to do is look at the title and you can answer this question. So that's no good. So let's try again. Let's say instead, which government department does Monsieur Loisel work for? Now, that's much harder to answer, but it's still not a good question. This is just a recall question. It's just asking me to name a fact from the story. It's not an open-ended question that will invite us to analyze the story. It's just trivia. So for a discussion question, I want to think of questions that I'm not sure the answer to, questions that other people can help me think about. So it's really useful to think about our elements of fiction. As I said in the introduction to the fiction section, you want to pay attention to character, to plot, all these different things, point of view. So I'm going to think about character, and I'm going to wonder, does the author want us to like Matilda? See, now this is a much better question. There's not just one answer for this question, and to really answer it will require us to look very closely at clues in the text. Now, I can reword it to sound a little bit more smarty pants here, so I could say something is Matilde meant to be a sympathetic character. Now I've used a little bit more academic vocabulary, I sound a little bit more sophisticated, but the question is asking the exact same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and submit, and I've asked my first good discussion question here. Now, I don't want to stop there. I want to go ahead and pose the second one to really make sure I'm helping get the conversation going. Now, I don't know if you're going to run into this glitch, but sometimes if I try to click reply here, it's going to just edit this one. So I sometimes have to go back out and then right back into the thread to be able to add a new reply. So now I need a second question. And this way, by creating a separate reply, I've got a separate thread that people can respond to for it. So I'm going to ask, why doesn't Mathilde just tell Madame Forestier that she lost, the necklace? So it's a fair question, but it could still lead to a very straightforward answer. Someone might look at this and say, well, she was just embarrassed, and leave it at that. But there is a deeper issue here about the character that this question is getting at. We just want to make sure we word the question so that it's clear. So let's try it this way. What does Mathilde's decision not to tell Madame Forestier about the necklace show about her character? Now I've taken this plot point in the story and I've turned this into a question about what the author wants us to see about this character. So that's much better, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and post that one. And now, as you see, I've got, like I said, 2 complete threads. And so people can have 2 separate conversations about these 2 things. So now let's pretend in a cruel twist of fate, I was also assigned to answer my own questions. By the way, you should not be assigned to answer your own questions. If I ever do that accidentally, make sure you let me know ASAP so I can fix our schedule. But for the purposes of giving you some examples, I'm going to answer this. So I'm going to click reply, and I'm going to say, I don't think she's supposed to be a very sympathetic character. She's very vain and selfish in the beginning of the story. And then at the end, even after she's had to struggle, she doesn't seem to have learned any humility when she says to Madame Forestier, I have had days hard enough since I have seen you, days wretched enough, and that because of you. Here she's blaming Madame Forestier, which is still very self-centered. So I've answered the question, I've provided some evidence, and that's it. Remember that we want to keep our discussion points brief and focused. We're not writing mini essays in the discussion forum. Make your point, give your evidence, step back, and see what other people have to say. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. And then, after I've submitted it as a reply to this question, somebody else is going to come along and wrap up this thread. Now, ordinarily, there'll be more than just one question, one answer in each of these little threads. Different people are going to comment on it. But, again, I just want to give you an example of how's the end of this look. So, I want to give a final analytical commentary. When you get this role in the discussion, you're trying to wrap up any ideas that were raised by others. So for this question, again, even though there's only one answer here, I might say something like, Madame Loisel is clearly a developing character. She does change and grow by the end of the story. But it seems, based on the evidence, that she has learned the wrong lesson from the experience. Instead of learning that materialism and appearances aren't important, she has just grown bitter about losing those things in her life. This seems to be one more important irony in the story. Again, not a full-blown essay that I'm writing here, just an analytical comment to wrap up the discussion. Now, I could be using more evidence here, throw in another specific example, but I have given a specific literary element by reconnecting to irony, so that's pretty solid, and you get the idea. And then I submit that, and we have one complete thread in the discussion. Now, these three parts of the discussion cycle are just designed to give us a skeleton to build on. We still want to see other answers and comments in addition to the assigned role. So, fulfilling your assigned role is the bare minimum expectation. And if that's all you do in a given discussion cycle, then you can expect only the bare minimum grade. If you want to really learn from the discussions and get the grades that show you've learned, then you really need to participate fully. So jump into the discussions and really think about the text. That's how you'll get better at analysis and be ready for your big paper this semester.